There is a white powder sitting on the shelf of every hardware store in America that kills termites on contact. It costs less than $1 per pound. It has been proven effective since 1934. Once you apply it to wood, termites cannot develop resistance to it. Not in 10 years, not in 50, not ever. It does not expire. It does not wash away indoors, and it never loses potency. For nearly a century, this compound has been the simplest and most effective termite killer known to science. Then the pest control industry discovered something alarming, not about the powder, but about their revenue. A $28 billion industry cannot survive if homeowners solve the problem themselves. So they did what every industry does when a cheap solution threatens expensive contracts. They buried it under licensing laws, lobbied for professional-only restrictions, and made sure you never heard the three words that could save you thousands. Boric acid. Not a trade secret, not a banned chemical, but a mineral compound found in rocks, soil, and volcanic springs. It has been registered with the EPA since 1948 and used in over 500 commercial products. And yet, the average American homeowner has no idea it destroys termites. They did not stop recommending it because it failed. They stopped because it worked too well. A powder that costs pennies and lasts forever cannot sustain annual service contracts. And what cannot sustain contracts cannot sustain profits. This is the story of the cheapest termite killer ever discovered and the billion-dollar machine that made you forget it exists. If these stories matter to you, the bell and the subscribe button are the best way to preserve knowledge the industry keeps trying to bury. Here we open the vaults they locked shut. Now let me take you back to the beginning. The year is 1702. A German-Dutch chemist named Wilhelm Homburg is working in a laboratory in Paris mixing borax, a white mineral known since ancient Babylon, with hydrochloric acid. The water evaporates and what remains is a fine crystalline powder he calls sal sedativum, his sedative salt. He has no idea he just isolated one of the most powerful insecticidal compounds on the planet. For the next 2 centuries, boric acid is used in medicine and food preservation, from wound cleaning to tissue embalming. But in the early 1900s, entomologists in California begin testing something unexpected. They dust boric acid onto the trails of cockroaches inside military barracks, and every roach that walks through the powder dies within 72 hours. Not from poison in the traditional sense. The microscopic crystals cling to the insect's exoskeleton like shards of broken glass. When the insect grooms itself, it swallows the powder. Boric acid shuts down the lining of the gut. It disrupts the nervous system. It dehydrates the body from the inside out. And here is the part that made researchers pause. When the poisoned insect returns to the colony and dies, the others eat the carcass because termites and cockroaches are both cannibals. The boric acid passes from one body to the next, spreading through the colony like a silent plague. Scientists at the time called it the gift that keeps on killing. In 1934, researchers Kofoid and Williams at the University of California tested boric acid directly on subterranean termites. Borax dust placed in contact with termites killed 80% of the colony within 1 to 3 weeks. Termites exposed to wood treated with a 5% solution of boric acid all died within 4 days. Every single one. And when they tested aqueous solutions of borax placed under a termite-infested house, it successfully prevented termite penetration of treated soil for the entire year-long test period. But the story does not end in California. In Japan, builders discovered that laying newspapers treated with boric acid and borax under wooden structures effectively controlled both native and Formosan termite populations. The Formosan termite is the most aggressive species on Earth, capable of forming colonies of over 1 million individuals that consume a pound of wood per day. These are the termites that devastated New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, causing hundreds of millions in additional structural damage. And yet, Japanese builders were stopping them with treated newspaper and boric acid. The practice spread across Asia. Researchers in Australia confirmed that a 1% boric acid concentration reduced wood consumption by termites to 5% or less, while untreated wood was devoured at rates exceeding 80%. In 1948, the United States Environmental Protection Agency officially registered boric acid as an insecticide. By the 1950s, it was standard practice to dust the inside of wall cavities with boric acid during construction. Builders called it the invisible shield because one application during the framing stage protected the wood for the entire life of the structure. No reapplication, no annual contracts, no technician visits. The compound simply sat inside the wood waiting, and if termites bit into it, they died, carrying the poison back to the nest. For decades, that is exactly what happened across millions of homes in the American South. Termite damage in those homes was virtually non-existent. But then the pest control industry began to grow, and the economics changed everything. Before I continue, I need to stop here, because this video is only scratching the surface. I have compiled everything the pest control industry does not want you to know into a complete knowledge vault. This includes a 72-hour blackout checklist, a step-by-step survival protocol when the grid goes dark. It contains a firecraft manual with military-grade fire techniques classified as too dangerous to teach civilians. It features a lost rations cookbook with preserved food recipes that last years without refrigeration. There is a complete off-grid blueprint with full system designs for water, power, and shelter independence. It includes DIY water filtration systems that engineers tested and could not believe, along with natural pest control methods that indigenous cultures perfected centuries ago. There are over 10 guides in one place with no fluff, straight to the point. The link is in the description with the QR code on your screen right now, but stay here. The video is just getting started. Now let me show you the numbers. Termites cause more property damage in the United States than tornadoes, fires, and earthquakes combined. Read that again. More than tornadoes, more than house fires, more than earthquakes. Every single year, American homeowners spend over $5 billion on termite control and damage repairs. 600,000 homes are attacked annually. The average homeowner who discovers termite damage spends $3,000 just on repairs, and treatment alone runs between $1,000 and $3,000 on top of that. And here is the fact that should make you furious. Most homeowners' insurance policies do not cover termite damage because they classify it as preventable maintenance. So you pay for the insurance, you pay for the damage, you pay for the treatment, and the industry collects on every single step. Now compare that to boric acid. A 1-pound box of boric acid powder costs between $3 and $5 at any hardware store. Mixed with water at a 5% concentration, it treats dozens of linear feet of exposed wood. Applied as a dust, it fills wall cavities and creates a permanent barrier. The EPA classified boric acid as Group E, meaning there is zero evidence it causes cancer in humans. Its acute toxicity in laboratory rats is lower than table salt. Let me say that again. The most widely used termite killer that you have never heard of is less toxic to mammals than the salt on your dinner table. Over 10 years of efficacy studies on borax-treated wood prove that termites cannot develop resistance. Not reduced resistance, not partial resistance, zero resistance ever. The International Building Code lists borate solutions as a suitable alternative to soil-applied chemical treatments. The compound does not degrade indoors, it does not evaporate. Once inside the wood, it remains indefinitely. There are no natural forces that will break it down as long as the wood stays dry. A single application during construction protects a home for its entire service life. No callbacks, no quarterly inspections, no recurring invoices. Compare that to the industry's standard synthetic termiticide that needs to be reapplied every 5 to 8 years, requires licensed application, and costs over $1,000 each time. The math is not complicated. It is embarrassing. Now ask yourself a very simple question. If you have made it this far, you already know more about termite control than 99% of American homeowners. Subscribe and share this with someone whose house is silently being eaten alive right now. And remember, everything the pest control industry buried is in the complete vault. The link is in the description. Now stay with me. The next part is the heaviest. Why does a powder that costs less than a cup of coffee remain virtually unknown to the people who need it most? Follow the money. The United States pest control industry generated $28.44 billion in revenue in 2024 alone, growing at nearly 8% per year. There are over 33,000 pest control companies operating across the country, and the top 4 corporations control more than a quarter of the entire market. Termite services are the crown jewel of this empire. The average termite treatment contract costs between $1,000 and $3,000 up front, followed by annual renewal fees of $300 to $800. That is recurring revenue, the kind Wall Street loves. Predictable, scalable, endless. Imagine what happens to that revenue model if homeowners across the country discover they can treat every inch of exposed wood with a $5 box of boric acid powder from the hardware store. Imagine what happens if builders go back to dusting wall cavities during construction instead of signing post-build service agreements. Imagine what happens to 33,000 companies if the problem stops being a problem. The answer is simple, and the industry knows it. The entire business model collapses overnight. You cannot patent boric acid because it is a naturally occurring mineral, and you cannot create a proprietary version that homeowners need to buy every quarter. You cannot generate recurring service contracts when one application lasts the lifetime of the structure, and you certainly cannot charge $3,000 for something that costs $3 at the hardware store. So the industry did what industries do. They lobbied, they regulated, they complicated. In most states, termite treatment can only legally be performed by a licensed pest management professional. The EPA itself states that in most cases, termiticide application can only be properly performed by a trained pest management professional. Not because boric acid is dangerous, the EPA classifies it as less acutely toxic than table salt, but because the professional licensing framework was built around synthetic termiticides. These are chemicals like fipronil, imidacloprid, and permethrin, chemicals that are genuinely toxic and can contaminate groundwater if misapplied, and boric acid got swept into the same regulatory net. Here is where it gets truly cynical. The industry's so-called gold standard for termite control is a proprietary baiting system that can only be purchased and installed by licensed companies meeting strict corporate standards, meaning homeowners cannot buy it and independent contractors cannot install it. The system works by placing bait stations in the ground around your home and monitoring them quarterly for a recurring fee. It is effective. Nobody disputes that. But the active principle is the same concept boric acid uses. A slow-acting poison that spreads through the colony via feeding and grooming. The difference is that one version costs $3 and you control it, and the other costs thousands and they control it. The result is a system where a homeowner can legally buy boric acid at any store to kill cockroaches on the kitchen counter, but faces legal ambiguity if they apply it to their own foundation for termites. The same compound, the same powder, different application, different rules. And those rules just happen to funnel every termite problem through a licensed exterminator charging a $1,000 minimum. The industry did not ban boric acid. They did something smarter. They made it invisible. They made sure it never appears in the marketing, never shows up in the consumer guides, and never gets mentioned during the free inspection designed to sell you a four-figure contract. They created a world where the only answer to termites is a phone call and a credit card, and where asking questions makes you the irresponsible homeowner. And 600,000 American families every year make that call, spending billions in the process without ever knowing the alternative existed. Here is what the industry does not want you to do. First, a safety note. Wear gloves and a dust mask when handling boric acid powder. Keep it away from children and pets. It is low toxicity, but it is still a pesticide and deserves respect. Go to any hardware store and buy a box of boric acid powder. It will cost you between $3 and $5. For a preventive dust treatment, use a hand bellows duster or a squeeze bottle to puff dry boric acid powder into wall cavities, cracks along baseboards, and gaps around plumbing penetrations. The key is a thin, barely visible film. If you can see heavy clumps of powder, you use too much. Less is more. A light dusting is far more effective than a heavy pile because termites will avoid visible mounds of any foreign material. Termites will walk through the invisible dust without detecting it. The crystals cling to their legs and bodies. When they groom themselves, they ingest it. When they return to the colony and die, their nestmates consume the carcass and ingest the boric acid themselves. One contaminated termite can trigger a chain reaction that spreads through an entire colony. For exposed wood treatment, mix 1 teaspoon of boric acid into 1 cup of warm water and stir until dissolved. Pour the solution into a spray bottle and apply it to any exposed untreated wood in your crawl space, basement, attic, or garage. Focus on joists, sill plates, rim boards, and any wood that contacts or sits near soil. Pay special attention to where plumbing or electrical conduits penetrate the wood framing because those gaps are highways for termites. The solution soaks into the wood fibers and remains there permanently as long as the wood stays dry indoors. Termites that attempt to feed on treated wood ingest the boric acid and die. For a bait station, mix boric acid powder with damp cardboard or sawdust and a small amount of honey or molasses to increase adhesion. Place the bait near known termite activity, such as mud tubes along your foundation walls. Termites are attracted to the cellulose in the cardboard. They feed on it, carry particles back to the colony, and the chain reaction begins. Check bait stations monthly and replace them when consumed. One homeowner in Georgia told me he placed 4 bait stations around his crawl space in March, and by June, there was 0 termite activity in his annual inspection for the first time in 7 years. His total cost was under $8. I need to be honest with you about one thing. Boric acid is not a silver bullet for a massive established infestation deep inside structural walls where termites have been feeding undetected for years, hollowing out beams and joists from the inside out. In those cases, you may need professional intervention to reach the colony core. But here is what the industry will never tell you. Boric acid is devastatingly effective as a preventive barrier. Applied during construction or to accessible wood in an existing home, it stops termites before they ever establish a colony. And prevention is what the pest control industry fears most, because a homeowner who prevents the problem never becomes a customer. A $3 box of powder replaces a $3,000 service call. A single weekend of work replaces a decade of annual contracts. That is not a business model. That is the death of one. Your grandfather knew this. His generation dusted wall cavities with boric acid as common sense, the same way they changed their own oil and repaired their own roofs without asking permission from a corporation. Then a $28 billion industry convinced an entire generation that termite control was too complicated, too dangerous, and too specialized for ordinary people. They turned a $5 solution into a $5,000 problem, and they have been collecting on that lie for decades now. Consider the numbers one more time. $5 billion in termite damage every year across America. 600,000 homes attacked annually, $3,000 average repair cost per household, and most insurance will not cover a single penny. Meanwhile, a mineral compound proven effective for 90 years sits on a shelf for less than the price of a gallon of milk. The science is not debatable. The EPA registered it. The International Building Code endorsed it. University studies from California to Japan to Australia confirmed it. The only thing standing between you and the solution is an industry that profits from your ignorance. This knowledge did not disappear. It was buried under annual contracts and licensing requirements and free inspections, designed to sell you something you never needed. But boric acid is still here, still sitting on that shelf, still waiting. It waited through the rise of synthetic pesticides in the 1960s when chemical companies flooded the market with proprietary formulas. It waited through the corporate consolidation of the pest control giants in the 2000s, when 4 companies swallowed thousands of local operators. It waited through decades of television commercials and targeted marketing that trained an entire nation to reach for a phone instead of a hardware store. And it is still waiting for you right now. If this story changed the way you look at the hidden solutions in your local hardware store, please subscribe and like the video. We are uncovering the history and the knowledge they tried to bury. Protect your home and secure your future. The next vault of truth will be opened very soon.